The meadow had no name, which was part of why Elise Hartman trusted it. It had no signs or fences, just uneven ground framed by bare trees and low winter grass, a place people crossed without thinking about ownership or purpose. It neither invited attention nor pushed it away. It simply existed. Elise had walked this path many times before, enough to know how the earth softened after rain and how the wind moved freely across the open space, pressing the grass flat in long, quiet waves. That familiarity was why the man lying at the meadow's center felt immediately wrong. He did not belong to the pattern she knew. He was placed too carefully, his body aligned with deliberate precision, as if the ground itself had been consulted and had agreed. His coat was folded beneath his shoulders, his boots lay parallel, his arms rested close to his sides, not flung outward or tense, but arranged. His eyes were open and fixed on the pale sky above, alert in a way that slowed Elise's steps without her realizing it. She stopped completely a moment later, feeling the quiet around her sharpen. It was not silence that unsettled her, but the sense that the space itself had become attentive. She understood, without knowing how, that the day had already shifted away from anything familiar. Ignoring this moment would not return it to its earlier shape. A threshold had already been crossed. She waited for him to move. He did not. The meadow offered no cover and no reason for anyone to be there by chance. Leafless branches scraped softly at the edges of the clearing, a sound too gentle to be comforting. The longer Elise stood there, the more deliberate the scene appeared, as if the land had been prepared for this exact arrangement. She stepped off the path. Damp grass darkened her shoes at once, cold seeping through the soles and grounding her. Each step sounded too loud, as though the land itself were listening. The smell of cold earth rose sharp and clean. She called out once, then again, keeping her voice steady despite the tightening in her chest. When his eyes finally shifted toward her, the movement was precise and unhurried, as if he had been waiting for the right moment to acknowledge her presence. "Yes," he said. The calmness of his voice unsettled her more than fear would have. There was no strain, no confusion, no surprise. She told him he could not stay there, even as she knew the words carried little authority. He agreed without hesitation. When she asked why he was there, he looked past her toward the trees, his attention moving outward rather than inward. "Because if I stand up," he said, "everything continues." The certainty in his voice settled heavily between them. It was not dramatic or pleading. It sounded final. Elise crouched several steps away, close enough now to notice details she had missed before. Dirt beneath his fingernails, faint abrasions along his knuckles, a bruise along his ribs, old enough to be healing and recent enough to matter. These were not marks of a single incident. They suggested accumulation. She told him he was hurt. He did not deny it. When she asked if he needed help, he paused, then said he did, but not the kind that arrived loudly or drew attention. Everything in her experience told her this was the moment to stand, to create distance, to pass responsibility to someone else. Instead, she sat down. The cold soaked through her clothes almost immediately, anchoring her to the moment and to him. The meadow seemed to draw inward, as if the open space were paying attention to her choice. He told her his name was Daniel. She gave him hers. Then he began to speak, slowly and carefully, as though each sentence had been waiting for someone willing to hear it. He talked about quiet work, about systems built to absorb mistakes without revealing their source. He spoke of routines that thinned responsibility until it belonged to no one. Elise listened as clouds passed overhead and light shifted across the meadow, aware that what he described had been building long before this moment. It was not confession, it was explanation. "I told myself I was preventing damage," he said, "but I was only redirecting it." When he stood, the movement was controlled, as though he were testing his body before trusting it. She followed him toward the trees without asking why. The question no longer mattered. Beyond the meadow, the world began to reassert itself in fragments, distant sounds, narrowing paths, the sense that what had been held still was starting to move again. Beneath the trees, the air felt colder and heavier with shadow. As they walked, the land changed. Open ground gave way to spaces shaped by human intent. From a distance, the city appeared in layers, fields, roads, parking lots, buildings arranged with quiet confidence. Empty sports fields lay marked and waiting. Cars filled neat rows. From above, everything would look orderly and contained, the kind of place where nothing truly wrong was supposed to happen. Daniel spoke in fragments. Each decision, he explained, had seemed reasonable on its own. Each correction had felt small, even responsible. Only later did he understand what they formed together. Elise felt the growing distance between the world continuing around them and the one she had entered by stopping. Buildings clustered closer now, concrete and glass cutting into the sky. Paths wound between structures designed to function, not to welcome. Elise noticed how easily important places hid in plain sight, their purpose dulled by repetition and neglect. Daniel moved with the confidence of someone who knew these spaces well. He spoke of neutrality mistaken for restraint, silence mistaken for caution, and harm that vanished when spread thin enough. The river appeared gradually, first as reflected light through branches, then as motion. It was wide and dark, carrying debris downstream without pause. Traffic crossed the bridge above it, steady and indifferent. Daniel stopped at the railing and looked down, his reflection breaking apart in the water. "I stood here earlier," he said, "long enough to understand that some crossings aren't physical." He removed a small object from his pocket, wrapped in cloth. When he placed it between them, Elise felt its weight before she touched it. The key was old, worn smooth from use, heavier than it needed to be. "Someone will come looking for this," he said. "They won't be patient." When she asked why he had chosen her, his answer was simple. She had stopped. She had paid attention. That was enough. They crossed the bridge together. On the far side, the path split. One direction led back toward the city and its noise. The other narrowed into darker trees. Daniel told her this was where he would continue alone. Some places, he said, did not allow pretense. The ground remembered. She watched him disappear into the trees, the certainty settling in her chest, not as fear, but as obligation. What had begun as an interruption had become an invitation, and she had accepted it the moment she stepped off the path. She did not go home. Sleep, when it came, was shallow and restless, filled with narrowing spaces and paths that refused to resolve. By morning she had begun to look. Daniel's records revealed nothing obvious, no scandal, no clear wrongdoing, only the careful absence of error that marked people who worked in quiet margins. Elise traced the pattern through overlooked districts and repurposed buildings, places that existed just beyond attention. The key led her to a concrete structure in the industrial zone, windowless and unsigned, softened by neglect. Inside, the corridor stretched farther than expected. Identical doors lined the walls, the air faint with dust and metal. At the far end, one room stood open. A table sat beneath a single light. A folder lay waiting. The documents detailed decisions made behind closed doors, liabilities shifted, outcomes adjusted just enough to avoid scrutiny. Daniel's name appeared again and again, not as the architect, but as the buffer. Elise understood then that he had not been seeking rescue or forgiveness. He had been passing the weight forward, ensuring it could not remain hidden. When two men appeared in the doorway, composed and unsurprised, the room seemed to tighten. They spoke calmly, as if confirming an expectation rather than responding to a breach. Elise did not move. Outside, traffic continued along the river, unaware that something carefully contained had begun to surface. Days later, Elise returned to the meadow. The grass lay undisturbed. The open space looked unchanged, patient as ever. From above, it would appear that nothing had happened there at all. Daniel did not return. But the meadow remained open, quiet, and waiting for the rare moments when someone stopped long enough for what lay beneath the surface to reveal itself.